Hey everyone, today I just want to go over this indicator that I made for the ICT 2022 mentorship model. And first I want to start by saying that this indicator is far from perfect. It is not in any way meant to replace the education put out by ICT. This is just my attempt to put all the core pieces of the model together in one script in hopes that we could identify the setups a little easier and maybe just assist in some backtesting. So I'm just going to go over how it works really quick. And essentially it's looking for some higher time frame liquidity to be taken. So right here we trade through this pivot. And from this point on, it's going to be looking for market structure breaks that aggressively take a short-term low. And those are going to be indicated by these yellow displacement bars, similar to the displacement indicator I put out recently. And it's also checking if this candle had a fair value gap. And once these conditions are met, it will be looking for price to return back into this fair value gap and any subsequent fair value gap setups until we reach some sell side liquidity. And vice versa, once we take out some major sell side liquidity, it's going to be looking for bullish setups primarily. And it's going to be looking for some aggressive displacement through an old high. So we get that yellow bar right here. It has a fair value gap. And as price comes back into this fair value gap, it's going to be looking at that as a potential entry to seek buy side liquidity. So just to go over these settings, all these lines are just showing structure breaks and or liquidity runs. So you can turn those off with these settings and it'll just show the displacement and fair value gaps. I like to leave them on. And with this setting turned on, you can also see which pivots are being considered as major liquidity. So to go into that a little more, this structure pivot strength is basically checking which pivots are going to be considered major structure points. So this structure pivot strength right here is determining what swing highs and swing lows are being considered as valid structure points, where if price breaks those, we see a break in structure or a market structure shift. So for example, this candle right here, we have a structure pivot strength of 5 right here. So this is being considered a valid swing high because it is higher than the 5 bars to the right of it and the 5 bars to the left of it. Now for the liquidity multiplier, this is essentially determining your liquidity pivot strength based on the structural pivot strength. So if you have a structure pivot strength of 5, a liquidity multiplier of 20, it's going to do 5 times 20 and give you a liquidity pivot strength of 100, meaning that it will determine valid liquidity pivots if this point is higher than the 100 bars to the left of the candle and the 100 bars to the right. So this is obviously just kind of a crude approximation because it's not going to catch every liquidity pivot that you see on a chart. For example, if you consider this to be liquidity, you can see it's not highlighted in yellow, so this is just considered a structural pivot. But as you go into lower time frames, different pivots are going to be considered liquidity. Now for this break of structure type, there are two options. You can do close or all. And so if I turn on all right here, it essentially indicates a break of structure even if price just wicks through this previous swing high, and same right here and here. But if I put this back on close, then it will only consider breaks of structure where price closes through the previous pivot. Now for displacement, again, I mentioned that that was these yellow bars right here. So if we turn that off, you won't see that bar coloring anymore, but the fair value gap still stays on the chart. And you could do the same thing. You could toggle whether these FVGs show, but if you turn these off, then you won't see when price reacts to them. Now all this displacement and fair value gap stuff is kind of dependent on this displacement strength, and it's looking for bars where the displacement range is currently 4 times greater than the standard deviation of the past 100 or so candles. And so that range can be set right here, where you're either looking for an open to close range or the range from its high to its low. And so not only does price have to close through a prior swing high or swing low, but it also has to have a range that is larger than the standard deviation. And you can also adjust this FVG fill type. Currently these arrows are appearing when price reaches into this FVG at all, but you could be more specific with how you want it to rebalance. So we could say, we want it to reach halfway into the fair value gap, so this arrow should move here. And same with this one, you don't get an arrow until price reaches halfway into that fair value gap, or you could also wait for a full rebalance, which would obviously come much later. So the reason that there's no arrow here is because this indicator only tracks one bearish and one bullish fair value gap at a time. So once this new fair value gap is formed, this one is overwritten, and now the indicator only cares about this one. So I think the default settings are pretty good here to get started, but I'll play with them a little bit just so you can see what it looks like. So for example, if I put this displacement strength to 2, something much smaller, we're going to include a lot more displacement candles. And actually, while I'm at it, I might as well do break of structure type all, and we can see what comes up. So we have a few more candles in this structure. So obviously this was a pretty big up close bar and it wicked through this previous swing high. And the reason we're seeing that is because we selected break of structure type all. So if we put it back to close, this would not show. And I'm actually going to turn this on to halfway for FVG fill type. And now we can see some signals coming in for when price reaches halfway into that fair value gap. But the reason we're seeing a few more displacement candles than we were before is because we set that displacement strength to 2, meaning that it only needs to be 2 times greater than the standard deviation compared to the previous 4. So I like to put this on either 3 or 4 to filter out only the strongest displacements. And I think the structure pivot strength is set to 3 by default. I usually like to have this on 5 and 20 right here. And that's pretty much for all time frames. frame. So if I go to something like Euro USD, so I am on a 4-hour chart here, and it's seeing that we took out this previous liquidity right here, and now we're just looking for displacement through previous swing highs, and we're only considering bullish moves and bullish fair value gaps because that SSL was taken. So now we are expecting buy side liquidity to be looked for. So that is one major downside of this indicator in its current state, is that it's essentially assuming that once sell side is taken, it's going to be reaching for buy side. And so if price is in a persistent downtrend and it's just constantly taking sell side liquidity, then it's only going to be looking for buy setups. And vice versa, if price is trending strongly upwards, it's going to be looking for sell setups primarily. So I think this works pretty well in consolidation. And again, it's just another tool to be able to see these setups a little bit easier. If you have any requests on how to make the indicator better, I'm happy to listen and maybe include some future updates. But I'll leave the link to that in the description. If you found this video helpful, please feel free to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. That's all I had for today, and I'll see you in the next one.